Now we are moving to the technical session 6, paper presentation. I would like to call Dr. Humaira Shaukat, the faculty at Institute of Kashmir Studies, University of Kashmir, Srinagar. Mic is yours, Dr. Shaukat.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, actually my camera, I think there is some problem with the camera. Can you see me?
We couldn't.
Okay. There is some problem with my camera. So, okay, can I do like this?
Okay. Yes, please go ahead. If it's not possible to switch on your cameras, we can go for like this.
Okay, okay. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Sylvester for inviting me to chair this conference. Though belonging to a social science faculty, but I believe in that there is always a scope for interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity when it comes to the academia. And I will definitely be happy to chair this session because of the very important 4 papers. There are 4 papers in this session, and I find these papers very interesting. And let me before I proceed, I would like to give a brief outlook of this, what I have understood in the previous presentation, that is a fourth world literature. The presentation before this session was very amazing. It was very interesting. So it was about Australian Aborigines, how the people who belong to the nation, they are the natives, they are the indigenous, and how they are discriminated of their basic rights. So obviously in these papers there I could see that somewhere there is a plight of the subaltern in some novel, and there is some sort of journey from alienation to self-realization. There is also a kind of a reimagining the burden of history. So in every time we see a kind of an ideological construct of someone, and imposing that the construct on the aborigines, or for that matter the marginalized people. So far as this technical session is concerned, we have 4 papers. I would be just telling the names of the paper presenters. If they are around, they may start then. The first paper is Dr. G.M. Joseph Dunstan, Professor, Department of English, St. Jerome's College, Arts and Science, Kanyakumari, and the other author is J. Ajum Samuel Raj, Scholar, Department of English, the Kanyakumari district, Tamil Nadu. If they are around, please start your paper. And the title of the paper is Plight of Subaltern in Amitabh Ghosh's The Circle of Reason and the Hungry Tide, an Eco-Critical View. I hope they are around so that they can start their paper.
Okay. Thank you very much, madam. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ajun Samuel Raj, and I am a research scholar in St. Jerome's College, Arts and Science, Nagarkoil, Kanyakumari district. And I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the God Almighty and all the dignitaries who have made possible this conference. And I would like to give my sincere thanks to my research supervisor, Dr. G.M. Joseph Dunstan. I am the corresponding author of this paper, so I am going to present my ideas about this particular article of mine. Okay. So I hope my voice and my video is clear. Okay, so the title of my paper is The Plight of the Subaltern in Amitabh Ghosh's The Circle of Reason and the Hungry Tide, an eco-critical view. Okay, it's about the environment and the landscape of the people, how it was destroyed, and how the people were suffered because of the actions of the governments. Okay. So geopolitical blocs, we have already discussed a lot about the geopolitical blocs, which are divided by the economical strategics. So the geopolitical blocs are playing major role in creating or classifying in the economic and the social worlds of the globe. So the worlds means the first, second, and third, and the fourth world. Okay. So the play of this socio-political parties to get the perpetual place in the geopolitics is it was what we call it affecting the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of the penurious people. Okay, the first, the second, and the third worlds would have utilizing the globalization of the modern society, the globalization, to maintain the positioning of the economic ladder of the society. So there is a unseen economical ladder. We already knew that. So they wanted to make their position very clear in that economical ladder of the society. So the penurious um, people of the human society may have not seen the members of the global economic and may have not get any might have not given any contribution to it, but these should not exclude them from the categorization of the people of the world, and could not appending as victims of the modernization. So they cannot be the victims for the modernization. These geopolitical political blocks create gray areas in all around the world. These gray areas are existing in the even the first, second, and third world countries, which are called the fourth world. So this fourth world's literature is getting stronger and wider. Conventionally, model situation of the fourth world's what do we call it? The ethnic communities. Okay, the ethnic communities cannot be deciphered only with a view of the what do we call the landscape, but it must drag the attention attention of the people into this environment, inhabitant and language, culture, and social practices, which are the facets of the world. So Ghosh's The Circle of Reason and the Hungry Tide explicitly are dealing with this gray arena of the world. So we all know that according to the decisions of the United Nations conferences, all are classified that indigenous people have the right to remain and secure their place. That means their landscape and the landscape's practices, environment. Though, these were the rights delivered or given to the indigenous people, though the people of various ethnic societies have been spoiled and affected through the tyrannous actions of the Western society. It's not that all the blame should be showered on the Western countries, but they can be considered the giants who have been killing the indigenous internationally or intentionally or unintentionally. The mentality created amidst of the people of the world, the nations of first and second worlds are leading better lives, and they are in the position to control the world. So the image of perfection and richness in first and second world countries have covered or shadowed another side of the loss of ethnic values and the practices of nature-oriented lifestyle of that particular community people. It's not just a economic or social and cultural war between the Occident and Orient, like our Edward said. Nature is the best subject to describe the events or matters of the fourth world literature. Fourth world literature is deeply, what do we call it, rooted in the facts of indigenous people's mind and thought, and it is almost a mirror to reflect or show the sufferings, anger, loss, and emotions of the ethnic group. So economic and modernity cannot be the sole tools of subjugation of indigenous people. The fourth world might also have another facets to look. So environmental issues, the landscape issues, are also the prominent problems of the ethnic people. Okay, uh, uh, they what do we call, they were derived from that land. So the death of their inhabitants is the death of their cultural values and practices. They have been considered as inferior due to their nature-oriented lifestyle. The Anthropocene attitude. So Anthropocene means the human-centered attitude. But these ethnic communities people, they were not considered as a human. Okay, they were considered as animals or some other non-human object. They were driven away from their lands easily because of some what do we call it, greedy political political reasons, like our Naxalites. They were driven away from that Naxalbari village for the uh, bauxite from the mountain. So likewise, the Anthropocene attitude of the indigenous on the indigenous is obvious in various occasions. The hunter-gatherer lifestyle cannot harm the nature and cannot gain any contribution to the current economic strategic to the world. So terrific accounts, that means the horrific accounts of the natural exploitation, that means the landscape exploitation, driven away from that landscape also result in exploitation of the indigenous people's life, culture, and practice. They will be those things will be eradicated from their life. Okay, so in Amita Ghosh novels, in a, usually have the stand or a focus on the subaltern of the society. Okay, so he took his protagonist usually from the subjugated community or a subjugated group. According to the comment of John Halley, with a personal interview with Amita Ghosh, he said that Ghosh's roots are in the journalism and academic writing, investigation and analysis, a revelation of subterranean connections and patterns. Ghosh's central characters put their actions according to the imperial subjugations. So the subaltern of Bengal is a clear portrayal of subaltern of Bengal, and subaltern of all the other people of India is a clear portrayal of his novels. So Amitav Ghosh mainly took nature as a significant tool to convey his point of view on the subjugated or subaltern or the ethnic group to the world. So Ghosh literary aspect are obviously satirizing satirizing the imperial powers. That means the higher authorities, officials, government, directly and indirectly in both ways. Okay, so the novel Circle of Reason and The Hungry Trade are the best example to describe the fourth world literature and the contribution of natural subjugation among the on the indigenous people. Okay, so the in Circle of Reason, we can see the two main characters in the first part of the story. So that is Alu and Balaram Bose. So the Alu and Balaram Bose are the initial representatives of the Orient and Occident mentalities of the people. So Balaram was what do we call it? Balaram was being a brilliant student in his college days and in the presidential college, but his obsession on the chronology, that means the study of the skull and the setting of the what do we call the mindset. Okay, and his superiority complex had showed him as more of a Western absorbed man. He thought that he could have changed the world of science if he continued his research on the chronology according to his term. So he, as perfect example, is a model is this book called The Life of Pasteur. So he acted like a deciding authority on other people's life, that he will become like that, and he will become like this. Okay, he was what we call, he was a deciding authority on people's life because he was a school teacher in that particular locality in West Bengal. So he decided the future of the people. He will be fitted for this kind of job. He'll be fitted for that kind of job. So he was doing that, and he was being a more of a predicator than Alu's uncle. Okay, he was a paternal uncle of Alu. Okay, so Balaram and his passion on the chronology led him to the bombing of his own house. In the eventually he was the main reason to the bombing on his own house through the plane. So Balram and Alu's relationship can be considered as a war between the imperial and the subjugated. Balram forced the people to follow the mentality of hygiene, and he throttled to use the carbolic acid to cleanse the whole village, but he failed in his ability. What do we go here? He saw the people's lifestyle and he saw the people's practice as an unhygienic one. So he used the carbolic acid to cleanse the virus. That means the it's symbolic representation of the practices of the village people. So he can implement the Western thoughts into the people's mind. So Balram put Alu into the weaving profession because of Alu's mind. So Alu's skull. Alu has a potato like head. So Balram thought that he would be a person who is very much fitted for the weaving profession. Okay. Also he thought the lumpy head of Alu should be apted for weaving, not for studying. He stopped the schooling of Alu, and he put him as a weaver in his home. So this action of putting people into categories is indication Western attitude of creating the walls of separations among the people. So Alu then traveled. He got the after bombing of the Balram Bose house. Alu traveled what we call through various landscapes. Okay, he traveled to Kerala, and then he got the chance to visit the last part of the novel, that the last landscape of the novel, that is the oil-rich country called Al Jazeera. That's not a country, that's an island which is very much near to the Middle East mainland. So he initiated his journey with the dense forest of Bengal, and then he was pushed to by the circumstances to travel through the sea scape, and finally he reached a small oil-rich island. I have already told that, the Al Jazeera. He traveled. His travels itself are the symbolic representation of life of the subject. They have been traveling throughout their life. They have been driven away from all the inhabitants of the earth. So they live happily in their boundaries of nature-oriented life, but the mirage of the necessity of modernity and the post-colonial impacts have pushed them to travel across their boundaries, to have put them into the world of scientific improvement, but that's a desert. So finally, the driven away Alu finally reached the desert island. So Alu in Al Jazeera was identified as talented weaver, and he who was the main reason for the gathering of the others in the Edward Said stamp. Other means the marginalized people, the immigrants, they were trying to form a cashless society. They tried to move from the modernity to the old life terms. The marginalized people group of Al Jazeera gathered and wanted to create a cashless society. And one of the characters in that novel, Dr. Mishra, and he said that, why don't we give them more realistic picture of our culture? Why don't we show how rich landlords massacre untouchables and raise their villages to the ground every second day? It is his words, and these words explicitly explain the plight of the subaltern or the marginalized in this world, this economically economic strategic world. Thus, the point of subjugation to show the fear and power to the subaltern to keep them in line, explained in various events of this novel. The landscape is very important for the subjugation. These people are always connected with the landscape. So eradicating the landscape, eradicating the practices means eradicating the people from their lines, from their economically rich lines. So in the novel, also, the Untitled also Ghosh explicitly narrate about the subalterns' worries and their pain in the particular incident called the Morchapi massacre. Morchapi massacre is another example of subjugation and the victimization of the people. It's called a genocide. Okay, so the people of Morchapi came from various parts of the Bangladesh, and they formed their community and the ideal state of home. That means the community home in the forest of Sundarbans. So the local authorities,
Yes.
of local authorities of the Sundarbans, local authorities.
Can you please can you please conclude your thing, like, because we are running short of time, we have more people.
Okay, fine, madam. I will end this. The local authorities does not want them to want them there and force them to leave, but finally use the force. They use their force to kill many innocent lives in the names of saving the forest. They consider the people like animals, and they kill all of them. So these are the incidents. The same incidents were mentioned by our Ghosh in both the novels, and these are the incidents or the distinct explanation of the plight of the subaltern in this world. Okay, thank you all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for elaborating on the two novels, The Circle of Reason and The Hungry Tide by Amitabh Ghosh. But yes, what I have understood from this is that since being the student of social science, I have taken it the way that, like you used the term Orientalism, used by the Edward Said, in which there is a concept of Orient and Occidents, like
yes.
the mentality created for the Orients, like the binary opposites, like how the literature, how the text, how the discourse can create a mentality to subordinate others. That is, there is always a concept of others, which has been used by Edward Said. That is
Yes,
how
yes.
Occidents are using for the Orients. The same is reflected in the Amitabh Ghosh. That is a kind of a retaliation for the Western text, that
Yes,
how
madam.
they have dominated the whole discourse. Okay, and it is now only the counter reaction to that discourse, and counter discourse text, that is, which can basically highlight this what we can say, that marginalized people or the plight of the subaltern people, which you have rightly pointed out. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
good
Thank you.
presentation and the clear understanding of these two novels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. Thank you. Thank you all of you.
So
Thank you all of you.
we have the next paper by Dr. Rajatha Kamaran, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KG College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. And the title of the paper is Sanguinity Redux, Intrepidity in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5.
Thank you, ma'am.
Please mind, because we cannot afford to give more time to you. Please try to conclude in 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shaukat, and thank you all for giving me this opportunity. My paper is on Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5, and it's titled as Sanguinity Redux, Intrepidity in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5. Talking about my title, sanguinity is nothing but expecting a favorable outcome, and redux is bringing back, trying to get back the hope that we once lost. And intrepidity is the courage to face life as it comes. So I'm trying to justify it to the title of the conference, Fourth World Literature, because Kurt Vonnegut himself is a German who settled in America. And, later when he became a young fellow, when he was in his teens, he was deployed to Europe to fight World War II and was captured by his own people. He became an alien to his own people. He was an enemy to his own people. So how is he trying to survive? How is he trying to relive that life that he once lost is the main theme of my paper. Now, Kurt Vonnegut is a chief proponent of cosmic values such as humility, compassion, and love and kindness, because he has witnessed World War II. His own parents, they left Germany after they witnessed the aftermath of World War I, and they wanted their son to be away from their own people, so they never taught him German at all. He knew only literature. He knew only English, and he started writing literature because he knew only English. He wrote everything in English. There was nothing in German. Okay. Talking about Slaughterhouse 5, it is his personal anguish. Shall I share my PPT?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So what you see right now is it visible?
Yeah, it's coming on the screen.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Now, this novel was written in the year 1969, which was almost 20 years after he witnessed World War II. And, in 1960s, the young generation, they were facing Vietnam War. So all his novels were standing intact, or they were giving the same meaning as it gave to Kurt Vonnegut when he saw it in the year 1945. So he is, the character that we have here, Billy Pilgrim, is actually an autobiographical replica of what Kurt Vonnegut has seen when he was a prisoner of war. It is talking about anti-war theme. He has given another name for this novel. It is The Children's Crusade. He says that if you give a gun or a bomb to a child, the child may not know what to do. And he might cause so much of chaos. He might cause so much of, problems outside for the world. And that is what is happening to people who don't even understand what they're supposed to do with all these metal things that they have found. Okay, he's talking about science as well. It is not just about war. He's talking about the destructive part of science as well. Now, Kurt Vonnegut was in a slaughterhouse, I'm talking about Kurt Vonnegut, which can be parallel to Billy Pilgrim, a character, the protagonist of this novel, Slaughterhouse-Five. Billy Pilgrim was also a prisoner of war who was, put in a slaughterhouse, underground slaughterhouse. The previous day, all these prisoners, they go out to see the people outside. They meet the people outside. They go to a small inn where they have tea, and then they are taken back to the prison. They are inside the prison, and all they hear that night is just blasting of bomb shells around. I'll just show you the picture of Dresden. So this is what Dresden is. When they first see, they go around, they find an inn, they take their tea, but they are taken back to the prison or the slaughterhouse where they are put inside. And the next day, when they come out, this is the bombing of Dresden. And the next day, when they come out, this is what they see. Kurt Vonnegut himself was in a slaughterhouse during World War II. And that is reflected in almost all his novels. I'm not talking only about Slaughterhouse-Five. I'm talking about the rest of the novels like Mother Night and Cat's Cradle, where he talks about the defects that science have brought into the lives of human beings, because we don't understand how to use it properly. Okay. So the next day he comes out, and all these people are asked to clear the place, and they find logs of woods here and there. When they go closer to that, they find that it is just the dead body of human beings. Dresden is his own place. He is also from Germany. So when he sees that Americans have bombed the entire place, he is not able to stand that. And that is what is shown as the character of Billy Pilgrim, who is also a prisoner of war, and he is also put in the slaughterhouse. He is also locked in the slaughterhouse. He is engaged in burning all the bodies. It's a mass burial. He witnesses the Allied bombing of Dresden. So what happens is, in the novel, we understand that Billy Pilgrim he finds it difficult to sleep at night. He is not able to sleep. At one point in the novel, he says that he finds, he is able to snooze inside a coffin-shaped box. He is taken from Germany to America, and on the way, they put him in a coffin-shaped box, and he is able to snooze inside that box. He was finding that more peaceful than staying in his bed. He learns to become an optometrist. He treats people, but still all these luxuries in life, they are not giving him the happiness that he felt or the peace that he felt when he was inside that coffin box. So Kurt Vonnegut uses this phrase, this refrain, so it goes wherever we witness death. When we witness death in Dresden, he uses the refrain, so it goes. We witness the death of Billy Pilgrim's wife, he uses the refrain, so it goes, which makes the readers understand that death is a part of life. We cannot escape from that part of our life. All we can do is that we can relive the rest of the life. You can go back, you can think, even if you're talking to your friends, you are talking to your classmates, you can relive the past that you have already lived. But death is something that you cannot relive. Death is a part of your life, after which the other's life continues. Life never stops there. Okay. He says that Slaughterhouse-Five is actually talking about absurdity of life. Everybody who wages war will have their own reasons for fighting the other one. Can you ever say that this man is my enemy just because he is living in another country? That can never happen. Now, paralleling it to what has happened right now, we all watched this happen, that all the people from Afghanistan, they felt that I'm trying to parallel it with what is happening right now. I'm paralleling past and the present to make us understand that what he said then stands intact even today. We find that people wanted to leave Afghan. All the people, they reached the Kabul airport, and there were double bombing in the Kabul airport, which killed about 180 civilians. So all that he said during the past stands intact even today. It is the common people, the civilians, who die every day witnessing all these things, whereas they have nothing to do with all these fights. They are only trying to settle down somewhere. So Billy Pilgrim, he finds an alternate to escape from all this. He starts getting unstuck in time. He starts traveling from one place to another, and it's time traveling. And then he goes to a place called Tralfamadore, which he tells people, but people are not ready to understand. He moves to Tralfamadore and another planet, where those people teach him how to live. They tell him that he's supposed to forget about the difficulties of his life. He's supposed to forget about all the trauma that he has faced in his life and relive only the best part of his life, which Billy tries to practice in his life. But whenever he closes his eyes to relive the past, it is again the same bombing that is reappearing in his eyes. Psychologically, it has affected him that the best part of his life is all washed away. It vanishes from his eyes. But the best part of the entire novel is that Billy lives till the end of his life. He never commits suicide in the novel. He lives the entire life. When his wife dies, he continues his life. He loses everything in his life. He continues to live. And then he lives till death approaches to him normally, which is a positive sign of how life should be taken. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And
so
it
much.
is really, you have touched there's the impact of war. Rather, I may say that you are talking about war, but in the local terms, like you talked about Afghanistan, I may be talking
Yes.
about Kashmir, being a Kashmiri scholar.
Yes, yes.
So we are also living in the conflict zone, and we are also encountering certain things which we actually are not part of, but we actually suffer in everyday life. Okay, so whatever you are talking about, the character in the novel, how he lived throughout his life, and without succumbing to the what the war situations or having a psychological impact on him. The same way we can say that in every conflict zone there is an impact of conflict in their everyday lives, and it has a differential impact on gender also. Like a woman is suffering in a different way, a man is suffering in a different way. And we do live in these circumstances because at the end of the day, it's the human who has a kind of a quality of assimilating or absorbing certain things. Okay, so living with those experiences and getting to know and moving ahead is basically the most important thing, which also this character is showing in this novel. Thank you very much for if it would have been a more time, we would have discussed it in a more elaborate way because of
I wanted to bring it in a nutshell because you said that we are running short of time.
Definitely, because we have more two papers, so we have to listen to them also. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'll be inviting the third doctor. No, it's the PhD research scholar Manisha M. From the Sri Ayyappan College for Women, Kanyakumari, Tamil, and the title of the paper is Journey from Alienation to Self-Realization, a Trans Women's Flight in Outspoken.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Just a moment, I will be sharing my screen.
Yes, you can start your presentation.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So good afternoon. I am Monisha, a PhD research scholar from Sri Ayyappa College for Women, Chinnathadai, Kanyakumari district. So the title of my paper is Journey from Alienation to Self-Realization, a Trans Women's Plight in Outspoken. So this paper is about the lives and struggles of transgenders in Julio Cirino's work Outspoken, a decade of transgender activism and transfeminism. So people who identify as transgender encounter numerous obstacles in society, including lack of awareness, understanding, and acceptance of their gender identity. So through this work, the intention the author is not to seek any sympathy, but to make the society be aware of the fact that the transgender are also humans who have their own feelings, opinions, thoughts, and emotions. So the terms sex and gender are puzzling expressions which gives out a more narrow definition. The word sex refers to categorizing a person, whether that person is male or female, by looking at their physical appearance. The word gender refers to the state of being male or female in relation to the social and cultural roles that are considered appropriate for men and women. Julio Cirino is an American writer, LGBT activist, biologist who brings out her personal experience as a bisexual trans woman. She was born as male, but at the age of 11, she started feeling the feminine qualities inside her. She transitioned in 2001 using hormone tablets and other medical supplements. So as a trans woman, she combines feminism and other issues along with her personal experience to support her views. A broad definition of transgender refers to anyone who moves away from the socially enforced boundaries of the sex they were assigned at birth. This definition is what is typically understood as a universalization definition. Some transgender people are those who want to move away from one sex category to another, who are identified as female to male or M to F or F to M, that means male to female. So when a person defines mainstream society's ideology, that person is considered as a non-straight person, and therefore, as a result of it, they are included in queer, which is an umbrella term valid to the individuals who is often associated with the categories of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. So transphobia is an irrational fear of aversion towards transgender whose gender identities, appearance, or behaviors deviate from the social norms. So usually the trans women are considered as fake for wearing feminine clothing and obtaining feminine identity. Cirino says that when we say women, that word always includes trans women also. A woman gender identity is her innermost concept of being a female. A trans woman gender identity doesn't define or carve her woman, simply describes her journey to womanhood. So she says, in trans misogyny, trans women are mocked not for deteriorating the gender principles, but for their expressions of femininity and love for being a female. Cirino mentions that transsexuals will face the problem in two different things when it comes to their gender equality. The first one is the gender we subconsciously feel to identify as, and the second one is the gender we subconsciously feel ourselves to be. So being a trans person whose body just doesn't match with their inner self, they feel disoriented and guilty about their own gender identity, which leads to a drastic psychological trauma. Ideas about trans embodiment and identity change dramatically once trans people started having a voice about their own experiences. Some of these movements occur in both feminist theory and queer theory, the two academic fields that explore gender and sexuality. Women's liberation is some very key ways to fundamentally about challenging social rules that determine what kind of things we should do based on our gender and our bodies. Medical theories of trans identity doesn't often use the broad definition of transgender. Instead, they define trans people as those who want to move away from one sex to another. It's important to note that some transgender people might be perfectly fine with the medical model of transgender identity. Much like other forms of discourse, help us to understand the self, and it helps us to make a sense of ourselves to others. The authors of transgender community give the transgenders a true voice. Most of the works of the trans-identified writer are usually classified as autobiographies or memoir. Since the genre of life writing is an art of self-expression, these personal stories give a real picture to the lives. It gives a person the opportunity to express his or her opinions and experiences while also being to witness for a group. So when an autobiography addresses the problem of marginalization and offers a cure for elevation, it increases its status. The author becomes the voice of the community by addressing the various problems that the community faces in their day-to-day life. The autobiographies of transgender people serve as a testament for the documenting the common trauma of the community. So every trans woman ought to be respected as a woman. So becoming a woman is the only way they seek normality, and hence they wish to be identified as a woman and not as third gender. The society should let them be what they are and try to harass or humiliate them. So, Cirino mentions a significant fact: trans people undergo transphobia because of the misrepresentation of their genital status, while cis women, that is normal women, are subjected to the violence as per the gender representation. Cirino stresses the fact that the feminism must be included in trans activism, not just to bring equality, but also to challenge the old norms and the idea that female is lower to male. Space for identity awareness and performance with the support from the hero to mainstream. Here, and feminist theories provide a basics for thinking about these topics rather than defining certain group identities. The central idea is profoundly rooted. It succeeds not only in promoting the tolerance and equal rights, but also in questioning the institutions and establishments. Cirino mentions that male to female transition would be both a self-empowering act and one that potentially empowers femaleness itself, if trans women were seen as changing their sex mostly because they decided to be female. This sexual objectification of trans women's intentions not only minimalizes their own female identities, but also emphasizes that trans women as a group have no worth beyond their potential to be sexualized by men. The conventional idea of trans-binary considers that man-woman dichotomy as fixed or absolute. This binary system marks the distinction between the men and women and assigns their roles in the society. It rules almost all the walks of the society by molding the perceptions and attitude of the people. It codifies everything from language to dress of the people. The people who deviate from the code set binary by this gender binary are treated as an oddity and as an unsocial being. Thus, she states that out of her experience that the explanation for these disparities is that femininity and femaleness are not valued or appreciated to the same level as masculinity or maleness in our culture. Julio Cirino stresses the point that for the emotional well-being of each and every transgender people, their individual identity must be affirmed. So they should be given their own identity awareness and performance with the support from the hitherto mainstream. Therefore, she brings up the genuine portrayal of the plights and plaints of the entire community of not just trans women, but also about the entire transgenders. Thus, Cirino became the spokesperson of the entire community by addressing the various issues they face in their day-to-day life. Through her work, she raises the key issues such as the status of transgenders, their identity, and the struggle for survival. Therefore, Cirino stresses the point that feminism must be included in trans activism, not just to bring the equality, but also to challenge the old norms and idea that female is lower to male. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, this title, that is Journey from Alienation to Self-Realization, a Trans Women Plight in Outspoken, is an excellent, you have excellent ideas about that how heterosexuality is considered as normal, and for that matter, the other categories, like I mean categories. See, we consider sex as just differentiating male and female, and gender as differentiating masculinity and femininity. And and also living in the society, we have given some norms, some normative things, which means heterosexuality should be considered as superior. So the notion of superiority and inferiority, or the power dynamics which is happening in the society, is basically the most important thing which we have to understand the plight of the transgender people also. There, wherein you have highlighted about the cure, that how many lesbians, gays, bisexual people will be included in that. And whenever we see that within a society there are certain norms which are existing, okay, so we can only change those norms when we actually retaliate, or the text which is coming up now, which is showing a lot of respect for those who even doesn't want to be fit in the category of male or female, or in the category of masculinity or femininity, is the most important thing. We cannot say that we are not able to actually poke nose in that. Yes, absolutely, we have not changed the society at the larger level, yes, but we are actually in a position to talk about the plight of all these people. Thank you very much. Now the next paper is Reimagining the Burden of History, Redeeming Memories in Carl Phillips Cambridge, which will be presented by Abhishek Trehan, PhD Research Scholar, Department of English, Punjab University, Chandigarh.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. This is Abhishek Trehan. As ma'am already said, I'm a PhD research scholar at Department of English and Cultural Studies, Punjab University, Chandigarh. The title of my paper is Reimagining the Burden of History, Redeeming Memories in Carol Phillips, Cambridge. So by going beyond the notion of belonging and unbelonging, my paper studies Carol Phillips's Cambridge by interrogating the remembrance of slavery and how it complicates social issues and political struggles in the projection of the slave past. The protagonist in the novel is depicted by foregrounding the past that contests against collective consciousness. Cambridge is the story of an English woman, Emily, who is a daughter of a plantation owner who travels to the West Indies to inspect the family property. Recording all events in her journal, the first and the longest section of the novel informs the reader that Emily has witnessed the killing of the plantation manager at the hands of Cambridge, who was a slave. Similarly, the second and a shorter section comprise an account from Cambridge's point of view. Phillips here has convincingly tried to highlight the idea that history has failed to give equal space to the other. Drawing on theories of memory studies, the paper examines how the history of slavery brings to light the concealed and a mediated awareness of the past by closing the gaps between individual memory, collective memory, cultural memory, and officially approved history that has successfully distorted the past. By reading the altered histories in the slave past, I delineate the characterization of the remembrances to recover the collective silences that are crucial to historicize the construction of the past. Carol Phillips's fiction explores narratives of cultural transition that reads discourses of the past. The repetitions that run through the course of history in his fiction aims to trace the untold stories of marginalized Black subjects. Phillips, in particular, questions the dynamics of slavery by emphasizing on a disintegrated past. In Cambridge, he does so by interweaving many voices and varied point of views to retell the narratives of traumatic experiences of slavery. Within the context of these issues, the novel concerns itself with the ramifications of the colonial past and delineates the representation of those who have been silenced in the present-day culture. Divided into 5 parts, the novel is set on an unnamed Caribbean island sometime between the abolition of slave trade and the emancipation of the slaves in the 19th century. The novel presents 3 main texts framed by a prologue and an epilogue: the diary of Emily Cartwright, who was sent to oversee her father's plantation on a Caribbean island, Cambridge's story that resembles the slave narratives, and an anonymous newspaper report that alludes to Cambridge's murder of the overseer Arnold Brown and his subsequent execution. Memory has been a fascinating subject, especially in the writings of many post-colonial writers, to represent what history has failed to offer in the construction of the past. More particularly, in certain contexts, such as the slave past, memory allows to institutionally project and highlight the plight of the marginalized. Paul Ricoeur, who happens to be a French philosopher, is of the view that history is a selected remembering in a way that it amalgamates only certain portions of the past. In its simplest form, history functions as a record of selected events, putatively affirming to an accepted reading of a selected past. In Memory, History, Forgetting, one of his books, Ricoeur writes, history is first learned by memorizing dates, facts, names, striking events, important persons, holidays to celebrate. It is essentially a narrative taught within the framework of one nation. In other words, attesting to what occurred with references to certain documents, dates, or artifacts, history in many ways attempts to verify its authenticity. To that end, Phillips's Cambridge recapitulates the human experience that has failed to find a place in the documented history. The narrative successfully returns to the slave past and introduces the notion of multiple histories through a juxtaposition of voices. Phillips's portrayal of the characters brings the immediacy of otherness that is necessary to negotiate the colonial implications and their legacies in the lives of the enslaved people. At this point, Phillips reinforces the mindset and prejudices of an era replete with hegemonic connotations to further typify the colonial assertions. This sort of wariness is most acutely observed in the character of Cambridge, who encounters the repercussions of slavery firsthand. He describes his situation after having been moved from Africa to Britain in one of his memories. It's a long quote, so I'm not going to read it. Having established Cambridge as an individual who has undergone trauma of displacement, Phillips illustrates the position of slaves as he draws upon Cambridge's memory. Cambridge, who has lived a rather remarkable life as an African in Britain, ends up being a slave on the Cartwright estate. Not only that, Phillips has carefully attempted to exemplify the interconnection between selection and erasure, memory and history. While Emily's point of view contains almost 125 pages in the novel, just 34 pages have been provided to Cambridge to put forth his account, emphasizing the idea that history has mostly excluded the voices of the marginalized. On the whole, Phillips allows Cambridge's memories to critique the historical representation of slavery. Phillips challenges the official and unofficial narratives of history and memory by pursuing a reconstruction of the past through his characters, allowing their accounts to serve as a corrective. In the case of Emily Cartwright, a conscious reader will understand that her viewpoint is included in the novel to create a contrast between her and Cambridge's story. Abigail Ward observes that, quote, in their shade transgressions and refusal to conform to both readers' expectations and the expectations of early 19th century English society, Phillips shows that such characters as Emily and Cambridge are not predictable. They are more complicated than allegorical figures of black slave and white slave owner, unquote. In a similar vein, Paul Ricoeur builds on Michel de Certeau's, another historian of French origin, the historical operation by referring to it as the documentary phase, and writes that we must not forget that everything starts not from the archives, but from testimony. We have nothing better than testimony to assure ourselves that something did happen in the past. It is so because history can be easily manipulated to an extent that it would be forgotten. Abigail Ward writes in this regard, if British 20th century amnesia surrounding the past of slavery has been instrumental in the construction of non-white people as alien to Britain, then Phillips suggests the falsity of such a forgotten position, because slavery is not only black history, but the intersection of a number of disparate lives and history. By calling the novel after British town as well as a Caribbean slave, Phillips emphasizes the novel's dual position of both British and Caribbean history. It would not then be wrong to argue that history is unification, a narrative, and reconciling of diverse elements into a comprehensible story, while memory obviously seems interested in the incomprehensible. In the words of Michael Rothberg, like other traumatic histories, but with its own significant specificities, slavery poses fundamental challenges not only to the commensurability of trauma and justice and the temporality of redress, but also to the imaginary of victims and perpetrators that animates discussion of restitution and reparation. Phillips reiterates something similar in the novel by drawing upon this narrative that would also be considered as a slave testimony. The novel details the many lives of a black man, first as African Dolomite, then as English David, and finally as Caribbean Cambridge, creating a sort of legacy that confronts history's inadvertence. Phillips also awakens our interest by situating Emily at a crossroads in the novel, since her position as a white English woman is no better than that of a Cambridge, who is a slave. As Abigail Ward writes, while Emily's enslavement through her gender and later economic position is in no way commensurable with Cambridge's slavery, Phillips posits their accounts in a way which highlights their similarities. Both characters are enslaved by and excluded from narratives of English identity, though they are enslaved in a very different and unequal ways. Phillips offers the ambivalence of cultural differences by rejecting a generic view of the past and directs his attention on accentuating history's indifferences. In the case of Cambridge, the narrative assumes determinism to demonstrate against the exclusion of the traumatic experiences of the slave past in postmodern discourses. Dominic Lacapra, who happens to be an American historian, is of the view that trauma is a destructive experience that disarticulates the self and creates hole in existence. It has belated effects that are only controlled by memory. This is most evident in the case of Cambridge. There's another long quote, I'm not going to read it. These powerful but often painful experiences are either distorted or omitted from the historical narratives. Phillips underscores Cambridge's account of slavery as it pinpoints the misrepresentation of the past in the context of slavery. Maurice Holbach's is of the view that history is not invested in the intervals that points out to a life content with repetition in an unaltered form without rupture or upheaval. Similarly, Hayden White concurs that history, when presented in the form of a narrative, allows itself to be interpreted as a story or plot with meaning embedded in it. But nevertheless, the writing of history as a narrative further suggests that its interpretation largely depends on who writes it and the intention behind the writing. Phillips has chosen to imitate the genre of the slave narrative by reproducing the style of the 19th century, the novel. In the case of Emily, her story is chronicled in the form of a diary, and that of Cambridge retains the essence of a more personal retrospection. In doing so, Phillips reconstructs the past by giving the space to those who have been left out in the writing of history. Suffice it to say that the interpretation of history is determined by the disciplinary approach used by the historian to revive the past and not the actuality of events as they unfolded. And in conclusion, the individual traumas, when studied alongside the legacy of colonialism, implies an engagement with the erasure of the colonized subject's identity, stratifying continuous of complexity, articulating a tangible yet understated cultural past. The current issues of social inequality and injustice can be studied in a protective manner if there is a thorough understanding of how history and memory interrogate the loss of voiceless, allowing to work at the crossroads between the real and the imagined. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abhishek Trehan, for this wonderful paper. So in nutshell, I would be highlighting that all the papers were revolving around the marginals, plight, and the subordinate people. So I would like to say a few lines that science doesn't belong to the nation, reason doesn't belong to any nation, but they belong to history, that is to the world. That means telling that this particular science or reason is mine is not just the reality, but and it is based on this, stereotypic notion that has created the binaries, that is good and bad. Okay, and which Bettson has rightly pointed out, epistemological fallacies. If this mindset will not be there, everybody would be equal or would be superior at his own position. Thank you very much. Thank you all the presenters. If there are any questions, please you can either go to the chat box, you can write your question, or you can directly ask to the presenters. You can also write your question in the chat box. I can read that question, or you can directly ask to the presenter if any questions are there. I hope there are questions because the papers were really interesting, and I hope that you may have some sort of queries or some sort of you can also have some sort of suggestions to the presenters so that they can improve it. So I think there are no questions. So I would like to thank each and every participant for their presentations, and I would like to thank Dr. Sylvest for inviting me, and I hope I have completed my session in the due course of time. That is, I was given a slot of 1 hour, and I think it's complete 1 hour I have given. So thank you very much, Dr. Sylvest.